Yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor. I will stop talking now. Um, but yeah, typically I like to have you guys start out with a question. I have some seed questions or some like starter questions if nobody has a specific topic in hand that they want to talk about. But I'm going to go ahead and open it up the floor. What do you guys want to talk about as far as the member engagement goes?
I mean, I'll ask a question, which is what do you consider engagement? Because I have had a while ago, I'd been doing engagement scores, and I had a member who scored very low, but they considered themselves engaged because they read our newsletter every week. And I wouldn't necessarily consider that engaged if they'd never been to an event, but that was their thought. And it's more important that they feel engaged than I feel that they're engaged. So just what are like the metrics that you use and how do you reconcile that with how members feel?
That is a great question. Um, what do you guys think? I think starting off the call or the conversation with exactly that. So, what does engagement mean to you? Oftentimes, I feel like that's the first thing association people come to. Like, we're having a hard time with member engagement. But again, like, what does that mean? Is it that they're not showing up at events? Is it that they're not reading your emails? So, for those of you on the call, again, what does engagement look like for you? How are you measuring? Like, what are you considering when you are measuring engagement? Anyone? This is a quiet bunch. We've got so many people here. It's a quiet bunch. What's
I'll
going on?
I'll jump on. I mean, I'll give our engagement is, I think it depends to the point earlier. It depends on who you ask. As an executive director, I'm looking for people that are coming to events, coming to the programs they sign up for, giving us feedback, at least opening an email, right? I mean, nothing gripes me more than it's a gripe day. Nothing makes me upset more than you go to all this effort to send all this communication out, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't read that." And you're like, "Okay, well, I don't know how to fix that, right?" Yet they're some of my better members because they do show up at other things. So trying to understand what measurements, and I think I'm learning that depending on who I'm talking to, if I'm talking to my board versus my chapter people versus my members, they're all seeing that differently. And I feel like it's got to be this whole shotgun approach at a time when we're all trying to do way more than we have the capacity to do in the first place. So I'm curious of how, well, that's my 2 cents.
Kind of coming off of that, like your members who don't read anything, we also hear all the time, we're getting too many emails, and so everything's kind of getting lost in you've registered for 6 events, so you've got 6 confirmation emails, plus you're getting updates from us and your chapter, and check out this event coming up. And so, I find part of engagement isn't just how are they responding, but what are we giving them? Because if we're giving them what they feel like is too much information, they're going to freeze and stop reading and stop engaging, because the first thing they're going to think of is they look at their inbox and they go, why do I have 6 emails from you?
Yeah,
Um,
that's
That
why.
is
uh,
Oof, everyone's talking at once. I love it. Okay, someone else.
I'll step in. David Shillard with the Society for Neuroscience. We've started trying to take on the same exact question, separating engagement and satisfaction. We have a lot of members who are just purely satisfied without engaging with us. So they look unengaged in our eyes. They don't come to meetings. They might open an email or two throughout the year. But when we can have a chance to check in with them, when we see them, or have a reason to reach out to them, they are our biggest fan. Because they are just very satisfied with what we do for the larger neuroscience research community. And that led us down a pathway of satisfaction with the association versus engagement with the association.
super interesting. So you, David, you're doing, instead of measuring how they're engaging, you're measuring the happiness of the member or the satisfaction of the member, because if, as long as they're happy, and it doesn't matter how you define engagement because you're putting these things out there. Is that kind of the thought? Or
Yes. I mean, it's not a fully developed thought or research plan or strategy or metric or anything, but it's the deviation that we have noticed that some are just very satisfied, even though they might only open the newsletter 6 times a year.
I have a quick
yeah,
question
Uh,
about I have a quick question about that. Have you done any demographics? Like, is there an age group? I mean, because I think there's a group of people that join organizations because it's always been done that way and they're loyal and so forth and so on. And then the new people coming up, they don't have that same loyalty, and we just did a deep dive into why we were losing some members, and the age group was 30 to 49. And then
mhm.
a whole nother group of people that just like, of course I'm going to be a member, of course, that's just the way it is. So have you done any demographics on that?
We have uh, the ma the majority of this. The majority of the highly satisfied renews every year are more senior long-term members, more senior long-term scientific researchers, less so any early career or graduate student member of the society. But there are then pockets of early career, graduate student, postdoctoral researchers who have very little engagement, but have maintained membership and have told us they are very satisfied with the association. So that is a little bit of a conundrum to us. It might depend on who their mentor is, because they're getting a more subtle approach to member benefits, I suppose. But the main group the main group here is a more senior, more uh, longer termed, longer tenured member.
We definitely see that our my net promoter score between my members who are more tenured is probably 10 times higher than my young professional net promoter score when we parse it out. But there are a lot more of those tenured members. But the problem is those folks aren't going to be around forever. And how do we make the young professional members want to become those folks who have stuck around with us for 50 years?
Sounds like the same conversation I have, uh, for sure. We have done a net promoter score. We have a decent overall. It is good, but it varies if depending on where in the world our member is, and their where they are in their academic research career, for sure.
Maybe the issue is if an old guy like me is defining engagement, to me, engagement is you open the newsletter, you read it, you click on a link, something pops up. Oh, I'm engaged. I've attended a committee meeting. I've attended an event. I've done something. Yet there's probably a whole nother and at the end of the day, why do we care about engagement? We want them to renew. And so we've got it in our head, if they're not engaged, they're not going to renew, which we're hearing may not be true. Our past president was unengaged for years. And then all of a sudden decided, I'm going to get engaged. And next thing you know, he's president. But he kept renewing. And I'm going crazy looking at these stats. Our newsletter is open by 60 some percent every month. Our online community had very few people posting things. And then I went and looked at the background, and it said 80% of the people were opening and looking at the posts and reading them. They just weren't choosing to respond. So does that mean I always thought, well, they're not engaged because they didn't start a conversation, didn't add to it. But they read it. And I realized I'm still reading from the fundraising group I was in, their daily thing, and I'm not responding, but I read it every day. So I'm engaged. So I think engagement is very fluid. All we have to do is psychically get into the mind of every member so they can tell us, I am going to renew, I am not going to renew, I consider myself engaged, I don't consider myself engaged. So we just need AI to psychically pop into everybody's head and we're all good. Yes, I've had a lot of coffee this morning.
Or, okay, so you don't need a coffee, but I offered it to whoever needs one because I don't know about you guys, where I'm at right now, it's a little bit gloomy. So that does help with like, it doesn't help when it comes to like being bright and chipper and awake. I kind of want to take a nap. But anywho, um, so Jeff, you were saying, okay, so we need to, if there's a way to get into the member's mind. So that brings me to essentially what I say probably on every call, but why don't you just ask them? So, granted, you're not going to reach every member in that sense because, again, if they're disengaged with the organization through email or whatever, they're not going on your website. But does anyone ever ask their members, like outside of David, you had talked about the net promoter score, so you're asking about satisfaction, but has do any of you ask your members how they prefer to be contacted, what they're actually interested in, how they want to engage with your organization? Because I had said up earlier in the chat, like I do believe that there are some people that join an organization and they truly don't like, they don't really want to be bothered. They don't really want to engage. They're just going to stay in the background, and we're going to call them these like lurkers who are still getting a lot of value from the membership, but they just don't care to like show up in a volunteer role or show up to an in-person event. And that's okay because again, maybe they're reading the discussion posts and they just don't want to post on their own. Maybe they're reading the newsletters, but they're not, again, not showing up at events, whatever it may be.
Yes, but you only find that out from the ones who actually respond.
Yeah.
And that rate can be low. If you're just using email, and we were talking earlier how many emails we get and how many emails we send and how long your survey is and the mood that they're in when they get it and any number of other factors.
It's
So,
interesting though, we tried to do like a sample engagement score and presented it to the board and had everybody kind of look at it. And we used that methodology of thinking like when our members aren't doing this thing, then it means that our association isn't doing well. And so whatever this thing is what engagement looks like. So we looked at how many years you had been a member and renewed on time, how many committee roles you had, did you do board roles, were you a chair? Did you go to in-person educational events? How many of our big annual meetings did you go to? And the person we scored, the board really liked those metrics. They were like, that's great. That sounds perfect. So I scored our president that year, and she scored a 72 out of 100 for engagement points. And so we had this moment of like, wait, hang on. If she's the president of the college and she's not scoring like an A for engagement, what are we doing wrong? Right. And so I think, Brittany, what you're saying is really important. It comes back to like we didn't ask her if she felt engaged and why she felt engaged. We came up with a bunch of stuff and said, we think this works. And then, wound up putting her in a position where in front of the board, she was like, okay, but you've scored me over the last 15 years. I had children, like I had toddlers at some points. I couldn't show up, but I wasn't unengaged. I was always ready to get back into the volunteer pipeline.
We did a similar exercise in a cross section of members, intentionally, but also intentionally like dropped in several presidents, several board members, just to see where they shook out across a couple thousand other cross section of just members. Uh, None of our presidents, board members, volunteers who we see all the time who have been doing something for us for 25, 30 years were in the top 50. And that was eye-opening, I think, in the same way it might have been for you. Uh, and it led us to rethink, what does it mean to be engaged? And what did we score versus not score? We haven't really revisited this in a number of years because we haven't been able to come up with approach. Uh, but some of the names that came to the forefront, we had no idea who they were. But they've engaged a lot with our programming, our meeting, our journals. Uh, but we didn't know who they were. Did I need to know who they were? I think it was another question that popped up when our executive director, when he saw this and he didn't know any of the top 50 people, he was like, well, this is not correct. I should know the top 50 people. And I tried challenging him on that. Why do you need to know the top 50?
In my past life, I was on the board of our local fundraising chapter. There was about 100 and some people, and I was in charge of our monthly luncheons. And I asked the group, I said, so what's our goal? To get the maximum number of people in chairs or to get the maximum number of members in at least one chair at least once throughout the year? In other words, engage more members or just fill the seats? I'm not sure they were ever able to answer that question. So they didn't even know what their own answer was for engagement.
So I feel like I love this. Again, I love this topic. I think I don't know if Ginger, you feel the same way, but it feels like it's almost creating more questions for me. Um, but I love that problem, right? Because these discussions are intended to, again, help solve problems. And to do that, you need to ask a lot of questions, in my opinion. I think it sounds like what it's coming back down to is how are we defining engagement? And that's probably, again, it's going to look different for each organization. But if you can get on the same page with your team and your organization on like, these are opportunities to engage. And we're saying that this is an opportunity to engage because XYZ. So the annual meeting is an opportunity to engage because it brings the members together. It gives them education, like additional benefits, right, that they can carry with them throughout the year. Um, the I have a hard time saying like emails are like a newsletter is a source of engagement. I would say that's more informational. But I do think that people measure, like when I was in associations, I used to work for medical associations in the Chicagoland area. We would say like if people opened up an email, they engaged with it. But it could also be that somebody opened up that email and it was entirely irrelevant to them. And we assume that they engaged with it because they opened it. And we're giving them a point for engaging, but that they might have just clocked out at that point, which is something interesting to think about too. So, does anyone on the call feel like they have a pretty clear understanding of like how they're measuring engagement? Or are we all on the same page here where it's like we don't really know yet, and that's a problem that we're trying to solve?
I'll go here, Brittany. For us, Citation Jet Pilots, it's an owner pilot association. There's an incentive for our members to be engaged to a certain level because the more that they're engaged, so they're all pilots that own aircraft, jet aircraft, and fly them. And so the more engaged they are, and we have specific criteria, they will get we call it a gold standard safety award. And insurance companies that insure these private jets are recognizing the fact that our engaged members, by the fact that they've accomplished this list of items throughout the year, makes them a safer pilot, and thus their insurance rates would go down, the premiums go down. So for us, that engagement piece with having a carrot at the end of that, a reason to be engaged, is makes it simpler. But what we're trying to do is we have a small group that are engaged to that effect, and we're to that extent, but we're trying to expand that to the other folks that aren't quite engaged. But one thing we've learned is exactly the discussion here is, and we've sent out surveys, but some people are join our organization just for the discounts. Others join because they want to achieve that. Everybody says they want to be safer pilots, but others are more likely to go to those events that are going to make them safer pilots, go to our, join our webinars and such. But that piece of, if I do X, Y, and Z, I will not only be a safer pilot, but I will have the benefit of lower insurance rates. So that for us, we have a couple of different things going on, but overall, same thing. We always say, how do we get more people engaged overall? Because at the end of the day, our goal is to have safer pilots. And so for us, the engagement piece is kind of a way to measure, how serious our pilots are for flying safer and just being more educated. So it may be a little bit different for different organizations.
I like that. That kind of ties into Dorothy, I believe, had mentioned a little bit earlier in a comment in the chat that there's oftentimes no incentive to be engaged with an organization. So it sounds like, Rob, you're actually giving a reason for somebody to do more than just like open up an email and occasionally post in an online community or something of that sort. Nice. So Scott had put an interesting comment in the chat as well. Uh, Taking a step back. So we did start this conversation with like, how are you tracking engagement? What does that look like? What does engagement look like to you? But he had challenged us to think about, why are we tracking engagement? And I think it might have been either Brian or Jeff that had mentioned, like, obviously, if somebody is more engaged, there's a higher likelihood that they will renew and remain a part of your membership. Um, but let's talk about that a little bit. Why is engagement such a hot topic right now? Is it simply that, or is there something more to it?
Well, we're a small association, not by choice, but that's what's happened. And so it's just, I'm the only staff person, okay? So we rely heavily on volunteers to help us with all these things, right? And so that engagement becomes critical to the sheer existence of this group because they're bringing the professional knowledge. These are the people, the business people that work for architects and engineers, but to bring in the marketplace knowledge, what they're seeing in the day-to-day operations of their companies. Um, and so we rely on just that intellectual property knowledge for them to be sharing and helping others, learn about it so they too can make their firms better. And so that engagement for me is important just to have people sharing. That's part of our purpose is mission, is networking and education. And so coming to programs where we're getting teaching and posting questions on a forum and getting an answer when you ask a question, that's really what we need. But it's because of the size we are, because nobody else can go out there and like create all this stuff. So we're trying to provide that. And so that's what we're looking for to go after that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and just building on that, I mean, I think renewal is the big motivator, but it's also cumulative because, as Stephanie was saying, I always say that the biggest benefit that we offer is access to other members. And the fewer members you have, the less access you're offering. And so it kind of does become cyclical, or not cyclical, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for those associations like ours that have another aspect of generating revenue, which is partnerships or sponsorships, and so it's a two-legged stool where you're not going to track the partners at a level that you want without growing number of members and having them engage. So for again, it kind of ties into the end goal of the association. But I know for us, that's what's important also is the partnerships because part of the attraction for our partners is to have the access to our members. And the more that show up to convention, the more that are engaged, the more they're going to see that. So it's this cyclical thing. And I think ultimately why engagement's important is just like we heard, it's for survival. We're all competing for resources, many different resources and decisions from our members, right? Of where they're gonna spend their time and their money on and that's all important. And we're always competing for that, regardless of what the association is with everyday life. So I think survival is part of it for the association.
For us, it started as a question, as a program evaluation. Gosh, 15 years ago, wanting to explore. I think it just came into the chat as well, measuring whether you're providing the programs that are relevant to your members. When we first noticed a downturn in retention 16 years ago, it became a question of a program evaluation question. Are we providing the right products and services to our global membership? That led to an engagement metric, which led to utilization rates, which led to net promoter score, which led to satisfaction scores. It's like we're still trying 16 years later to really pin down what helps us answer the question, are we providing the right programs that are relevant to our members? Engagement was just one part of that journey.
And we just conducted a member survey, and it only got about 15% of the members. And of course, you tend to get your engaged, active promoter group to do it anyway, so your results could be biased. But in the first glance through it, I told my team, I am a little more interested not in what they liked, what they loved, but there were a couple of key benefits where significant chunks, like 20% of the people who responded said, I didn't even know we had that, which is telling me that maybe we're not communicating it enough. They had said in the past, advocacy was our number one thing, and we're the only one advocating for them. But then I'm like, you know what? Then we need to tell them more. We need to talk about it more so they know what we're doing. And now I've discovered this other thing. We have these other benefits. So we think, oh, we got everything. And maybe we do. But if 20% of the people who have been members for 5 or 6 years don't even know it exists, then maybe it's our fault they're not engaged.
Yeah,
Maybe
Jeff, if
they're
I
ignoring that newsletter or that sixth email we sent them today.
Yeah, Jeff, if I could follow up on that, you kind of jumped right in my brain. I was thinking, are we using engagement to impact our marketing as well and our communications? Because that's another important piece of this, where if you find that certain strategically desirable groups within your membership are not renewing or are not engaged, however you want to flip-flop those, that could drive your budget. That should kind of drive your marketing goals. Like Jeff, if what you were saying, if one of your key benefits or something that you've been able to prove through data analysis shows that it does drive engagement and does drive renewal, you would think that you could put more dollars towards marketing that in whatever form that might be. It doesn't have to be email, whatever form that might be. So I think we're all agreeing that there's really a lot wrapped up into this, but marketing is going to be a piece of it too, because you're not going to just naturally have engagement. Yeah, you're going to have some people who, 25 years ago we called mailboxers who would just join and they would hope to get the magazine in the mail. Obviously, we're not, that's not where we are anymore. But I think it's really important for us to kind of tie or do the best that we can to tie all of this together. And marketing is going to be a piece of it because if they're not aware of it, they're not going to become engaged. And so, that's something else to think about.
Um, I agree. Something I started almost a year ago, so I don't know how it's going so far, but kind of a year two onboarding. So everyone onboards their members, right? We all do that, but a lot of things about our benefits is they only care about it when they need it. And if you don't need the benefit when you're getting the email about it, it goes, in one eye and out the other. And so how are we reminding them about the benefits without doing a glut of emails to them, so that they know that the benefits are there when they need them?
I think this might be changing the topic a little bit, but something that just kind of came into my mind is there are 31 people currently on the call today, right? And only a handful have like spoken up or made a comment or posted something in the chat. Now the question is, in terms of engagement, as a part of the group, if I were to look at the group membership masterminds, I would say these 31 people are engaged because they showed up, right? They showed up to this event. But while I'm sitting here on the call, and my background is like, I only a handful of you have actually engaged on the call. That's what it feels like to me. Um, so does that mean that like are is everyone else still getting value out of this? Are you not engaging because you just want to? Steve said, "I'm a mailbox attendee." Um, Jennifer's over here like, "I'm taking notes. I'm here just to like absorb as much information as I can." I love it. But again, it's kind of like help me understand how we would measure engagement for the people that are on this call. Or if we don't have an answer, I think it's just something to consider is again, like this is a really good example of we've got a handful of people here that are again actively participating in some way. I guess I don't know the actual question that I'm trying to ask, but it feels like I want to say that all 31 people are engaged, but I know that again, if they haven't actually participated, should we consider them engaged? Jackie's over here like, I don't know. Jackie's like, yeah, you fooled me. What do you all think?
Well, I think it all starts to fall back to that question of what do you define engagement as? And I think one of the things I've also seen, engagement has become, for lack of a better term, a buzzword because it's not just in the member space, like it's not just in associations. Engagement is what's your social media engagement? What's your follower engagement? What's your, if you're larger companies, like what's your market engagement? So we're hearing about engagement and it doesn't mean one thing for all industries, which means it can't mean one thing for all associations that are connected to those. Because some associations like mine, where our big benefit is it's a networking opportunity. It's the chance to meet, to be someone from San Diego who needs a connect in Philadelphia. And you can reach out and we say there's like never a cold call if you're a member of ours. But that's different from like I've worked in medical associations and it's not about the can I reach out to someone? It's the I can state in my paper that I have this designation from this association, which gives my words weight. And so they engage differently. The member who's in it for the networking engages differently from the person who needs the designation or the discount on the insurance because they need the insurance to be a qualified, jet pilot.
It's kind of like you need a Venn diagram where you take the member personas, like you have that member that's always going to contribute. They're a content creator, they're somebody that posts on the community forums, and that's a personality type. And then you overlap that with the programs and the services, and then you get what is, you know, whether they're engaged or not, because it's not just a function of the program and whether they participate in it, but it's also a function of their personality type and their persona.
Maybe it's a factor of who doesn't renew their dues. Like if we assume just using this little group as a microcosm, some are talking, some are chatting, some are just taking notes furiously because it's good, and some are probably trying to get work done and listen at the same time, right? But they're here, they showed up, so that counts in my book for something. It's the people that disappear on us. We know those are unengaged and can. And mom is like, well, why? Maybe that's I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud for our group. Like, why aren't those people? Because the names I see in my non-reneweds are like, I don't really know them, because we didn't pull them in somehow. And so how do we remedy that?
I had someone on a recent membership call say, our my big thing lately is if I can get someone to renew once or twice, they're more likely to stay a long time. And I learned that at ASAE. And so someone was saying, yes, we're losing. Most of our students join because their professor makes them join and then they lapse. And so we'll fight that all day, despite the fact that we probably have more for new nurse practitioners than anybody else in our audience. But someone brought up a good point. They said, that first year nurse practitioner who could be 30, they could be 50. When they don't renew, is it something we did, or is it the fact that your first year of practice is so overwhelming, you don't have the time to take advantage of anything we do? So does that mean we got to figure out more stuff to get them interested, or we sell them a discounted 2-year membership because they'll finally be able to come up for air in year 2? I don't know that answer. We just are trying to tackle that.
And that's a good point with like student members because you have people who are in it, like you said, their professors require it of them, or it's a great opportunity or they won a scholarship and now they're a part of a chapter because they're a student studying real estate. But they go to a couple things, but they're not quite into the industry yet, or their first year into the industry is super overwhelming. Like you said, how do you get them engaged enough to make the transition and then to, in a few years, pay more to stay a member? Like, what's the value prop that you give them, and what's the return on investment for not only sticking it out when you're a student and maybe don't have the money, and then moving to the next member tier?
So that's interesting. We just set up our prop fuel onboarding. We've been running it a month now, maybe. And our onboarding is, like the 12 steps over 9 months or 6 months for new members. But for students in first year, everything is accelerated. Everything's 2 weeks apart. So we can run through the entire thing in 3 months because a student could be joining us today, but graduating in 4 months. And so we're packing everything in so they see it all. And what's interesting is these students who don't normally engage, their engagement rate with Prop Fuel is double what I'm seeing from the other members. And neither of the percentages are crazy high, but they'll go up. But new members is like 15%, students is 30. They're actually responding to this. And the later emails, some of them have only gotten two, is getting more responses than the first one. So now they're just going to completely blow my head up because now they're engaged because something fits them, but we won't know for 6 months whether we did it right.
Onboarding is definitely a long time. It's a long game. You're in it for the long haul for that one. And that's okay though, because you got to spend the time like figuring them out in that first year in order to continue to show them value continuously beyond that. So I think starting with asking them the question is a good point. But yeah, I can imagine it's a little bit frustrating not knowing right away like what's working and what isn't in some ways. So Jennifer just posted a question in the chat too, which is perfect because I was just about to ask a similar thing. But as far as re-engagement goes, um, how are people? I get caught up on this question because I think we're still kind of stuck with how we're defining engagement, but I think we can still answer this and talk about it a little bit. But how are people bringing back unengaged or lapsed members? Like, are there different strategies that you've tried that have worked really well, or even things that you've tried that didn't work well that people can learn from here? Anyone want to speak to that?
I mean, it's not quite a lapsed member, but right before they expire, I send an exit survey if they haven't renewed yet. And fully half the people who fill it out, the first question is, why aren't you renewing? And the most popular choice is, I didn't know I was up for renewal, even though I've sent them two mail invoices, a ringless voicemail, and 12 emails. Somehow it still got by them. And so that has been the most popular way is, oh, you're serious. Um, so that's helped, like just having it as part of the renewal campaign.
Uh, to kind of tag on what you said, Brian, I have a membership committee and they have just recently started picking up the phone, or well, I'm sure they're not picking up the phone, but sending an email to the individual. So it's not like, their members get nose blind to my emails, the auto sends that happen and the automatic renewal notices. So they're actually either calling or emailing and saying, hey, we see you're expired. Did it just slip by you? And that I'm a big advocate of personal contact and it's very relational. And somebody, it's like nobody cares what you know until they know you care. And I think that somebody reaching out that way we've seen a a little bit of impact there, not entirely. But it's been a few that I was glad to see those renewals because they were definitely some of our more engaged folks. So maybe it was just a coincidence, but you know, personal follow-up if it requires time, but I think it does. People won't tell you no as much when you ask. Like there's a direct ask, right? They can ignore an email, but if you look them in the eye or talking to them on the phone, you'll just I think they respond differently.
I think re-engaging lapsed members is different than trying to find people who've been hiding under a rock. We've got some advocacy stuff going on in New York, and we've engaged the thing where you can quickly log in and send an email to your legislator. And we had, in the last 6 weeks, 600 people do it. Now we opened it up to members and non-members because we just needed the flood of emails. I suppose if I wanted to really see if I could get my AMS to tell me these are engaged, these are unengaged, and I sent different links and I could compare response rates between engaged or unengaged, then maybe I could tell, aha, this is what got people to finally stand up and say something, or it didn't. But if we send something to everyone, how do we even know? Are we going to say, well, we had a bigger response than the last one, we must have gotten more engaged members? I think it's probably more of a measurement thing. You'd almost have to do A/B testing with certain groups to see if one group responded and one group didn't. I think if our numbers go up, we assume, oh, more people are engaged.
I have a quick question on the emails that go out, especially the one where you said a survey is sent. Um, is that being sent from like a generic email, or is that being sent from, somebody's work email that works at the company?
Yeah, that last email is going out from my coordinator. It goes out from her directly. It's an Outlook email.
Mhm.
And it is a, hey, you haven't renewed. We understand. If you could let us know why so we can improve, blah, blah, blah. And there is a difference in the response rates we get from when we send out directly than when it is sent out through a marketing platform that is more likely to get picked up by spam filters and whatnot. So there is a difference there, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
I think I started typing this in the chat, but while there's a lull, I'll jump in again. But I think it's interesting because with this topic, really, we're almost talking about two different things. Um, One is how are we winning back lapsed members? So members that have already left, how are we getting them back through the door? And the other is how are we re-engaging people that might have fallen off the radar or maybe like took a step back. The thing with question two is that it almost generates even more questions because then we're wondering like how are we even measuring how engaged someone is to begin with. But I would be curious if anyone has had a member or members who were previously very engaged in a sense of they were attending meetings often, they were volunteering for things, they were posting in online communities, and then they just kind of stopped. Has anyone had that experience? And if so, how did you handle that?
I mean, I just want to, I don't want to talk too much, but somebody mentioned earlier that their president stepped away when she was raising kids and stuff. And I think we see that all the time. Different people are going through different life experiences and that makes them step away, but it doesn't mean they're, gone forever. So I think there's a difference between somebody who's got a reason for doing that and then what happens when they're bored or not getting their needs met.
And sometimes I think my chief member and chapter services officer often describes membership as kind of like a marathon that you get into, that you get out of your membership what you put in. And so for people where it's like they fall off for a minute, sometimes we've mentioned like life happens. People have had kids or health scares or other health concerns, and there's really not much you can do to like bring them back except to keep them kind of keep shooting them a reminder every once in a while of, hey, we're still here. Here's this thing you might want. But it's how do you track those people who maybe have pulled back or left, not because they're unsatisfied with their membership, but because their world has changed. And you can only track that to a certain degree before it's like you've got pages and pages of notes in an AMS system that you're just like, I can't figure it out. I don't know why you left anymore.
I it would say that's the same situation with us. We have uh, our eyes on a fair number of up and coming neuroscience researchers. Some completely disappear on us. What we learn, and we try to stay in touch with them. Some completely disappear. Some we learn left the science. We try to track them. We learn they left the sciences, or they went in a completely different direction with their career. Uh, it's not and found another professional home. Uh, so it's a challenge, for sure, from an engagement standpoint. They looked like they would be the next president in 30 years, but when they change course of their career, that can pivot quickly, and pivot quickly to a different association, a different professional home, at least for us.
All right, a couple of things. We've got about 8 minutes left. So if there are any other questions or problems or what have you you want to chat about, feel free to speak up right before I open the floor again. Quick reminder, we always like to ask people what they want to talk about next because again, these roundtables are for you. And just to give you an opportunity to talk with one another about whatever is top of mind at the moment. So if you have thoughts for what we should be discussing in April, please go ahead and drop that in the chat. Or feel free to speak up as well, whatever you prefer. And yeah, with the less than 8 minutes left, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that people want to explore?
Yes, Brittany. There was a question. I don't think this individual is still on the call anymore, but at 143, Topher McLarty, I thought that comment was very smart. These are all existential questions about engagement, but would be interested in any examples of efforts that actually worked. I don't know of any. I would love to know of some if there were any out there. I feel like every conversation I have is kind of like this, or it starts to break down as soon as you start to question it a little bit and say, yeah, those are all risks, issues, but we're doing it anyway. So I would be very curious as a future topic or any commentary here on Topher's question from about 20 minutes ago. Sorry, 10 minutes ago.
I can share a very small win, not going to save your society. But in New York State, if you want to be a nurse practitioner, you have to take a state prescribing course, which is literally just read this PDF and take a test. And you can only get it through us or the nursing group. And don't tell them, but their link pops up with malware warnings. So we get about 2,500 people a year who go through our course. And everyone was getting emails, both reminding them about the process, but encouraging them to join and offering them a discount. And we were seeing nobody take us up on it. A lot of them are out of state doing telehealth. So then one of my team members said, well, let's offer an e-membership for people who live outside of our state in the immediately adjacent states. And it's half price because they don't get all the in-person benefits. There's quite a few things they can't do. So we offered this e-membership. Now we only have 15 members, but that's 15 more than we got when we just said, hey, here's a discount, be our regular member. So we had to tweak it a little bit. That's 15 out of probably 2,000 who have seen it now. So it's got a long ways to go. but part of it was we needed to give them something a little bit different.
When I had been doing engagement scoring a while back, I took everybody who had a 0, and my goal was to try and get everybody up to a 5. And one thing I did was email them about a benefit they weren't using. Like for us, it was we had these specific things for people who worked in the nonprofit sector, and I emailed everybody who worked in the nonprofit sector about this thing, and I got so many responses that they didn't know it existed. And the fact that they even responded to the email, I felt was like a notch above nothing. And so it made them see more value in their membership, even though they hadn't been engaging. Um, I left soon after that, so I don't know what the result of that was, but
Sorry, Brian, I got distracted by Jennifer's comment in here. So I don't have a follow-up to what you had just said. Um, but Jennifer had posted something in here too. They're struggling with getting new to the industry people to join, finding they don't appreciate the association's role of advocacy that protects their business, and their dues help to power that advocacy. This is actually very interesting. Because if you're pushing advocacy as a benefit of membership, and they're saying that they don't see that as a benefit or a value, um, where do you go from there?
That is a perennial topic we have at our annual meetings. So I'm just curious to if anybody else is struggling with that as well, and this may be another roundtable if it's big enough of a discussion.
Absolutely. I like that topic.
What would this focus on? Like the advocacy piece of it? Is that what we're thinking? Or is it just beyond like any benefits that we're exposing members to that they don't actually, that they're sitting here being like, I don't understand how this is a benefit?
Yeah, I think more the latter.
Okay.
Just getting new folks to understand what the benefits are, especially those that they may not get themselves, like the education is something that they get themselves. It's tangible with credits, but the advocacy is something that is going on behind the scenes unless they're asked to testify.
And they don't have to join to get the benefits of the advocacy.
Right.
Without advocacy, nurse practitioners wouldn't practice in New York State. But you graduate from school today, well, I get it. It doesn't matter. I didn't have it 5 years ago. I have it now. Why would I vote? Someone else is going to vote. It's just that thing of apathy. The one other thing that one of our people came up with is, and this probably happens in a lot of professions, so our diehard engaged members, if you ask them who they are, I am a nurse practitioner. You ask a 30-something and they say, oh, my job is a nurse practitioner. That's not who they identify as. I'm a mountain climber, a soccer player, a mom, a dad. And during the day, I go to work as a nurse practitioner. So they don't see it in their identity. So then they don't feel the need to join an association because it's just their job, not who they are.
Well, because I think with advocacy, especially, it's one of those things where it's when you define, back to definitions, but like when we define engagement, how do you define a member benefit versus, the general good that your association does for the industry it's in? Because, people think with their wallet first. And so for someone who's like, well, you're going to do the advocacy, whether I pay you the dues or not, does it then become that it's less of a benefit and more, and it's like you're contributing to the advocacy we're doing on your behalf because you need it, but it's not a thing that you can hold like a credit against your name or a certification or saying you attended an event and met the, director of nursing who's hired you for your new job. So like, do you define advocacy as a benefit or as a piece of the mission of the association that your dues support?
That's such a good question. It's a rhetorical question, right? Yeah, and I think personally, I think it's going to vary on the member, right? Like there are going to be people that join so that they can give back or they can be a part of the efforts that are going on the advocacy side of things. But yeah, so maybe it's just a matter of it's who you're talking to. Yeah, that's a good point too, Jeff. Alrighty, folks. I don't want to cut the conversation short, but it is 2 p.m. Eastern time. So we are reaching time. But if anyone has anything else that they want to chat about, any other questions, I'll hang on for a little bit. Happy to chat. Otherwise, keep an eye out for next month. We'll probably do some type of, we'll merge like the actual ideas of engagement, how people are actually engaging their members. So make it a little bit more tactical. And then this whole idea of like, how are we using benefits? What are we defining as a benefit? Thanks everyone for joining.